to Ringo's credit, he still manages to put, in my estimation, on this one particular tune, and we'll get to that, that'll be the end of this video, maybe the greatest drumming performance recorded, at least in the pop world, if not the drumming world completely, ever. Ever, 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 ever. Welcome to another episode of the Drummission. The Drummission. That's right. That's right. A channel that gives you the nuts and bolts of drumming. It's not only for the middle-aged person who wants to play with his buddies on the weekends in the bars and wants to have more facility, but it's also about the young guy who's coming up the ranks, and he's afraid that in order to break into the drumming world professionally, he has to be like Vinnie Colaiuta or Dave Weckl or Mike Mangini or Travis Barker or I'm trying to think of a young guy and I can't at the moment. I don't know because I'm old. Fill in your own guy there. These chop monsters, and you're afraid you got to be that guy. And I'm saying, do you need to be a certain level of good if you want to be a pro? Yes, you do. Yes, you do. However, there's something else you need. And that something else is something that Ringo had in abundance. It's something that Stuart Copeland had in abundance and many others. And it's something that Steve Gadd, if you're emulating him, had not only the chops, but he also has this in abundance. And it's that which we cannot name exactly, but I can only show you what it is. All right, let's put all that aside. That's what the channel is about. Thanks for joining me. Okay, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. This album has some of my favorite Beatles songs ever and some of my least favorite Beatles songs ever. So let's get the gorilla out of the room. Well, before I even do that, let's talk about the history. This was a Paul idea. This idea of doing a concept album. And this was something that was happening in that time, right? The Who would end up doing Quadrophenia and Tommy. And then later on, we got the Moody Blues doing Days of Future Past. And there was Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon. All these conceptual albums. And Paul was going to do an album, wanted to do an album, where they were pretending to be a different band, and he had the costumes and all that in his mind, and the stories he came up with it on the plane on the way back from India. And they get as far as the first tune, bleeding into With a Little Help from My Friends, and then they say, forget about it, let's do tracks. So John, somewhere in some interview, says there really was nothing tying the tunes together except that they said the tunes tied together. There wasn't anything that made the tunes tie together. They just said they did.
It's called the first concept album. It doesn't go anywhere. Mr. Kite, all my contributions have absolutely nothing to do with this idea of Sgt. Pepper and his band. But it works, because we said it worked, and that's how it appeared. Yeah. But it was not as put together as Pet sounds. Yeah. And it doesn't have a concept. It starts out with Sgt. Pepper and introduces Billy Shears, and that's the end, apart from the so-called reprise.
Right. They were just songs that could be on any other album. But during this time, because Paul was becoming more of a control freak, for lack of a better term, a divide really starts to happen between John and Paul and George and Ringo, and that's the first divide. Like I said, I may have said it, I may not have said it. I believe this is the beginning of the end of the Beatles. This album demarks the beginning of the breakup of the Beatles. And then it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse until they're gone. They get their divorce from each other. So let me have Ringo and Paul talk a little bit about that time, and then we'll come back.
See, I never really liked Sgt. Pepper. I think it's a fine album. All the work we do is fine. But I think I felt like a session man on it. We put so much on it, strings and brass. And you'd sit around the studio for days while they're overdubbing other things. It is a fine album, but just for me, emotionally, I prefer Abbey Road.
In fact, during the making of Sgt. Pepper, George hadn't showed for most of the album, which was unusual, because we normally showed for our recording sessions. George hasn't been too interested in making that album. I think he was building a swimming pool. And it was just all a little bit like that. And of course I was sort of thinking, thought, well, I won't say anything.
So you can see here, Ringo felt like a session person, and really George, he found God in India, and he wanted to really dive into what this inner peace was about. And he just was not interested in being a Beatle anymore. And he definitely was not interested in bowing to Paul McCartney or John any longer. So this was beginning. This had started. But to Ringo's credit, he still manages to put, in my estimation, on this one particular tune, and we'll get to that, that'll be the end of this video, maybe the greatest drumming performance recorded, at least in the pop world, if not the drumming world completely, ever. Ever, 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 ever. Also, in my estimation, one of Ringo's worst performances is on this album. Let's talk about that first. Okay, Paul was a bit of a control freak, fixing a hole. It's one of those times. The hook is good, but Ringo never establishes anything. And I blame Paul partly for this. I blame Paul for not being articulate. Since he was trying to control so much of this album, he doesn't tell Ringo really what he wants. And Ringo doesn't know. And it just sounds muddy. Muddy. Ringo, even though sometimes his technique was a little weak on some things, especially in the early years, he always managed to do a deliberate groove. He played deliberately. Not so on Fixing a Hole. I have no idea what he was trying to say. And then, of course, there's When I'm 64. To me, that's one of John Lennon's things where he says that's grainy music that Paul used to like. And then there's Within You Without You, which is a cool song. It's the only song that they say you saw George smile. And George was the happiest in those sessions during that tune, because he was finding out who George was. This is the moment he starts to find out who George was. So it's not really my cup of tea, but it's not a bad song necessarily. Okay, how does this help you if you're a young drummer? We're talking about creativity. Ringo was not Buddy Rich's second cousin. Ringo was not Vinnie Colaiuta's older brother. Ringo did not have super fast 30-second notes. Ringo did not have a double stroke roll that you'd kill for. Ringo did not have the blushta lick going on. None of that stuff. But let's take the song Getting Better, which is a Paul tune. But this may be one of the last Paul-John collaborations. John wrote a bunch of the lyrics, Paul wrote the melody and everything else. I guess Paul was unhappy with some of the lyrics and John filled them in. So this really is a collaboration. And the groove that Ringo puts to it, I do a Beatles tribute band and this is my favorite groove to play all night. He comes up with this idea, and I'm hoping it's Ringo's idea, it could be Paul, but what an idea this is. Let me teach you how to do this, and this is what I'm saying. Stuart Copeland has this too. He had unique ideas in his approach to the tunes. Stuart was not a great technician. He was a good technician. He had chops, more than Ringo, but he came up with ideas that were unique and individual and made the Police a thing. Sting, yes, and his great songs, but Stewie cannot be discounted. Neither can Andy. Same thing here with Ringo. Ringo cannot be discounted. Let's go to the drum laboratory and let me show you Getting Better and the groove he plays, which is so cool. Gotta make myself a little lower here. For some reason I'm having a hard time working the camera out. You know, I played this past weekend and I had my kit with me, and I don't think I set them up in the same place, and I don't know. Anyway, getting better. Getting better. So again, I don't know if this is a Paul idea for sure, but I'm believing that not all of it is. And Ringo, man, oh man. Watch this. This is a groove in a pop tune, 1967. Okay, we're starting out with 4 on the floor. Easy. Like I said, nothing that I'm going to show you here today it needs any practice from you. During getting better, he only hits 2 on the snare. He never hits 4. Watch. Easy. Here's where it's cool. On the duh of 3, but I'm thinking of it as the triplet, so maybe the let of 3, not really the 16th note. So, watch. Gorgeous, just a gorgeous groove. Fantastic, fantastic. Now, when you get to the choruses, now he has a hi-hat as a timekeeper. So you got 4 on the hi-hat, and he changes the bass drum from being 4 on the floor to 1, and again that duh of 3 or the last triplet of 3. But beat 4 is played by a conga or a bongo. I'm pretty sure it's a bongo. So, like this. And that bass drum part follows Paul's bass line almost exactly. And then you hear on a bongo on beat 4. So those 2 ideas, I love it. Because where is that written anywhere to play that kind of thing as a groove? There is no book you could find that in. Not one. This is where he found it, right up there. Again, was Ringo Mr. Chopmeister? No. What he came up with is unique, individual, and makes that tune what it is. Which actually is, to me, one of the last truly Lennon and McCartney songs. No, I will never say McCartney and Lennon. Never! Now, I feel I should almost be kneeling when I tell you about this song, and you know what song it is. A Day in the Life. So, we talked about, the last time we talked about Rain, and she said, and Ringo had done LSD for the first time, and he was really now playing out in the tunes. Many more fills. So, prior to that, Ringo was always compared to Charlie Watts, just playing the groove and that kind of thing, and I love Charlie. I think Charlie was one of the best groove players of the 60s and 70s, and Waiting for a Friend, that groove he plays in that, chef's kiss or whatever they call that. I think of a really dirty joke. I'm not going to say it. Okay, but in A Day in the Life, where I think Rain is really cool, but it's a little out of control, A Day in the Life is in control. And remember, during this time, they also did the sessions. They also did Strawberry Fields Forever and Penny Lane. Penny Lane's okay. Strawberry Fields Forever, the same idea. The same idea. Ringo is stepping up. He is stepping out of the just a groove guy and doing stuff. There is nothing in A Day in the Life that he plays that if you've been playing 2 years, you can't do. But the question is, would you have come up with it? Would you have come up with it? Let's go back to the drum lab. I'm just going to show you a couple of the fills he does, and this is what I mean. He does fills that become part of the melody. Part of the melody. A Day in the Life is a call and response between John's vocals and Ringo's fill. John's vocals and Ringo's fill. John's vocals and Ringo's fill. And his fills are unbelievably beautiful. A Day in the Life. Again, maybe my favorite piece of drumming ever. It's beautiful. It is a call and response between John and Ringo. What is the beauty of it? It's very simple. There's no polyrhythms, no 5-stroke rolls. Just very much playing with the melody a little bit. But the thing that makes it even more special to me, no cymbal crashes. None. So here you go. This is a hard thing to teach. I just want to show you because I want to get you thinking this way. Because it's Tuesday, you get the call for Saturday, and you're going to play Day in the Life. It's on the list. If I got the call, I would not be learning every one of Ringo's fills. I would hear the essence of it, and I would try to emulate that. And what are some of the things and the parameters in my head? All right, I'm not going to do any crazy fast things, and I'm not going to go over any bar lines, and I'm not going to do cymbal crashes. So let's just listen to a couple of them, okay? So we all know that melody. Ba 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 da ba da. You know, the same thing is when I sing, crows die.
Nice spot, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's great, especially because of that thing over there. You know what's in there? Corn.
Really? Wow, I could go for some corn.
You're dark, Raj.
I don't care.
Okay, never mind. I read the news today. Oh boy. That's actually the very first one that he does. And if you do that, you're going to like power of suggestion, set up their minds to believe now everything else you do is going to be what Ringo did. And the second line is ba ba da be da ba 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 da ba. And then I'm going to vary it because I don't know exactly what he does, but here's it. Here's what he does. He starts on the snare. He does some kind of staggered tom thing, maybe a little bit of triplets, ending on the floor tom. Ba da ba be da ba da ba. That would be good enough. That's I don't know what Ringo did there, but that would be fine. So again, I'm not going to do it exactly like Ringo, but I'm going to play with that idea. All sorts of little things. All sorts of things. I'm going to vary, but that's the idea I'm going to keep. And no cymbal crashes. No cymbal crashes. So if you do that, and you do that theme, the guy who hired you is going to hear you do some of them like Ringo, and he's going to say, oh man, let's get that guy back again. All right, let me bring it back to me. I'm better looking, by the way. Okay. Those two songs make this album so good for me, for Ringo. The other song that I really like in this album is Good Morning, Good Morning. Because there's like about 3 odd meters in it, and Ringo plays it like it's just. You need to listen to it. There's lots of 3, lots of 4, and some 2 in Good Morning, and Ringo just kills those odd meters. Too many people don't know there are odd meters in that tune because he plays it that way. He plays it that way. Track by track with Ringo Starr, that's what this is about. Ringo has developed from that guy who played She Loves You, which is interesting, but it's not that far away from what everybody else was doing, to this kind of thing, getting better, A Day in the Life, where very few were doing in the way that he was doing it. In the way that he was doing it. And, to put the button on this, Steve Gadd, although he did it with much more technical skill, and Steve Gadd's facility was far greater than Ringo's, and if you watch his channel for any length of time at all, you know that Steve Gadd, to me, is the ultimate of ultimate drummers. He is the best. He is the GOAT. He wouldn't be who he is if he hadn't heard Day in the Life growing up. Alright guys, track by track with Ringo Starr, another episode. The next Beatles one I'm going to do, we're going to talk about the breakup. Alright, hope you enjoyed this. I hope people watch it again. If you disagree with me about Sgt. Pepper's, leave it in the comments. Call me names if you want. Alright, see you on the next one.